Where's YouTube? There it is. What is up, everybody? Tuesday afternoon, midnight, whatever the hell you want to call it. We got paid for play coming at you live to talk about some college hoops like we've done on the past few Tuesdays. Got Steven and Rex here coming at you live through the Daily Bread Media Network. So that's where we are live on YouTube. Hop over to there if you want to get into the comments and the chat of the few little segments that we got coming up. We got maybe some gambling stuff at the end for late night tonight and tomorrow, but most of the things are just going to be just some college basketball bar talk, just hanging around, talking some hoops with my man Steven. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I was 1-0 on my picks so far today. Shout out Texas A&M holding on barely. But, of course, Houston wants to play their worst game of the year tonight, the first time I bet them. But it's fine. I'm ready to go.
Yeah, this Houston start looks like how Wisconsin started yesterday. 40-minute game. There's a lot of time to turn around in that one. So if you're sweating that, put it in the chat here. We gotta kind of watch it while we got it on the side screen here. But yes, the West Coast Conference was good to us yesterday, and we were ahead of the pack, saying 3+ teams were going to make the tournament last week. So jump back, watch last Tuesday's episode, dropped a few little good nuggets in there of which teams are going to go out. And hey, no one's made us look stupid yet. What's up, Bullpen Bets? Glad you're tapping in with us. We are live on Twitter as well. So we'll be monitoring the comments there the best that we can. We just can't feature them here. And looks like Tennessee Shark has that Houston ticket with you, Steven.
Man, pain. Just pain. All I can say.
All right, so we got 4 topics coming up for today's episode. We're going to go through who we think is going to win the Mountain West, since that conference has just been in shambles compared to the West Coast Conference with their early season results. Kind of going to lead us into who we think can turn around these slow starts. We've seen some ranked teams drop some early games. Some teams that were projected to be solid drop into who they weren't expected to be. So are these slow starts, or is it something to be concerned about? We got to hit on Gonzaga versus UCLA. And then we'll get into some bracket talk in November with our battle for Atlantis picks. So Google that. Bracket comes up as like the second picture on Google. We'll go through that. We'll get some bracket talk so you can get yours ready as we get through the rest of the stuff. But let's get into who we think is going to win the Mountain West. So San Diego State was your preseason betting favorites, and then you kind of had Colorado State, Boise State, and Utah State hanging around the necks of the pack. But Steven, what is your assessment, I guess, so far, or is there any team that you want to start with?
In my heart, I still want to give it to Boise State. You still got Key Jab there. You still got Armouche there. You still got Emmanuel Acott. You still got Marcus Shaver Jr. There's still a lot of good pieces on that team that looks like they're starting to figure it out after their last 2 games of that tournament they were in, where they smoked Temple and then beat Ole Miss. But if for me having to put my money on it, I would put my money on Colorado State. I think San Diego State just doesn't they don't play up and down enough. They still kind of like to slow down the tempo a little bit. And if you're trying to slow down the tempo and switch in 3s for 2s with Colorado State, you're not winning that. But I think 4 of these teams will end up being really good this year, and it's the 4 you mentioned. It's Utah State. They already got a couple of their good wins already this year. San Diego State, they're always going to be San Diego State in that conference. I don't really care who the players are in there. They're almost impossible to beat at home, and they're always going to end up with a good record. Boise State always seems to find a way to get to 20 wins, but I really think this is Colorado State's year if they're going to make a run.
See, this is the season where I think we potentially get 2 teams, if not 1 only, in the conference. And this is my second conference I like to rep other than the A10. It's just they're going to be very A10ish this year, where I think everyone's going to cannibalize each other. Not much separates. Hell, the top 7 teams in this conference, Wyoming is a team that we haven't mentioned yet that hasn't dropped any of their results so far. And an impressive win at Grand Canyon. Sure, it's Grand Canyon, but going into the GCU arena isn't something easy. And Nevada has been the team that's fallen off. We're going to save them for later. But this is where Colorado State, you've seen it so far, and then you saw it with yesterday's game versus Northeastern. They have that style like Alabama does, where it's not meant to survive a whole season. It's meant to win you one game with the do and die by the 3. Yesterday was the second time this season that they didn't crack 80 points, and it was against Northeastern, which is probably not one of the worst competitions they've played so far, but that 38-7 run that they put in the second half shows you what they have in the back pocket. Is that going to be able to come up against some other teams like Boise State, Utah State, and San Diego State? Probably not. They only really have 2 barometer tests before they get into conference play with Mississippi State and Alabama. So when they get those 2 games coming up on their schedule, I guess St. Mary's as well, those 3 games I think are going to tell us what Colorado State's potential ceiling is so far this season.
Yeah. There's one team here that's still undefeated that I think is really going to end up looking kind of fraudulent. I think it's Fresno State. Like, they got a couple dudes back, but they haven't played anybody yet. We'll see it in their game. Some people want to call it late tomorrow night. Some people are going to call it real early Thursday morning, but they're playing one of the teams we talked about last week. They got Santa Clara in Fresno, and it says Thursday at 1 a.m. And that's going to be their real game. Like, if they win that game, then they're a team that I think could get to the top half of the Mountain West. But if they get blown out the same way Santa Clara has been blowing everybody else out, I think they're going to end the season like around 500 with a bad record in conference.
It's hard to gauge that game, but I get where you're coming from because, I mean, Santa Clara just put it on TCU last night without Vronich because he has mono and pulling a Sam Darnold there. But that's kind of where you don't want to get in front of that Santa Clara ship right now. So that's kind of where I won't write Fresno State off yet. I just don't have them in the pack that can compete for the title. They're a complete long shot if your book offers odds that you could potentially get behind. Well, that's kind of where I think it's still going to be Colorado State. Boise State hasn't shown me yet, and even Akot had one of his best shooting games that come down in crunch time in the final 3 minutes. They just fumble games left and right, and that's been the story of this and why they haven't come out on the top of the tournament yet. So even with this returning production team, returning guys, it's an early one. The game against Bonnie's, that's kind of what I'm going off of, and the UC Irvine game where come that late time, they just fumbled away the lead just because Shaver probably is going to be not the death of them, but at the point guard position, he just struggles to create against, I guess, too good or a similar competition to he is. And that's kind of where you don't want Akot to be the man handling the ball up top. So that's where the lack of the true point or a good creating point guard, I think, keeps Boise State out. And I think San Diego State, you can just not write them off yet. That offense is going to be too weak. Utah State is the only other team I think that will compete with Colorado State for the title. So those would be the 2 teams if I had to pick to make the tourney. I think it's going to be Utah State and Colorado State.
Yeah, I could see that. I'm still giving Boise a little bit more of the wait and see approach just because I am objectively a little bit of a fan of them. And I think if they can pull it off at home against St. Louis at the end of this month, and then they're another team that has a game against Santa Clara in December, I think you get those 2 wins. Those will end up being 2 really good wins at the end of the year. And I mean, the UC Irvine loss, that's a bad loss. I can't make up any type of excuse for that. Like, you got to win that game. But I mean, to play St. Bonaventure, a team that's like the most veteran team in the country pretty much, to within 6 points and kind of have a chance late in the game, I mean, I think a team like that is a team that has a chance to make the tournament as an at-large, as long as they handle their business in their other big games in the non-con.
So what's your official pick then for who's going to win the Mountain West?
But it's Colorado State for me. If anybody's going to upset them, it would either be San Diego State in a low-scoring game or Utah State in like just an upset.
I gotta go with Utah State here.
All right, but
even though I hyped it all up and I was happy as shit, I just have to like go against it here just because I can't ride Colorado State. It got to be a little bit different, so we have a nice little bet to watch throughout the rest of the season. Utah State's defense is just a little bit more proven, and the team's just a little bit more well-rounded than Colorado State, just being the offensive juggernaut. I just think like Alabama in the tournament type atmospheres, one off game catches them. But to stick with the team in the Mountain West, and then we'll get out of it because we're talking about teams who are struggling and if they can overcome these slow starts. Nevada has kind of a prove-it game tonight, sitting at 1-4 at the season, going against George Mason. If you saw on Daily Bread earlier today, I gave out George Mason plus 3.5 because I do not think Nevada proves it tonight. They just had to transfer from Robert Morris after 4 games. He's done, no longer in the team. Conduct detrimental to the team, got him kicked out. So the Grant Sherfield show rides solo again, and he needs some help. Will Baker, I guess, has given him a little bit, and Washington as well. But Sherfield, when he's not been on these games, the team has been out of it. And I don't know which way you want to go with it. I have a lot of thoughts on them, so let's hear it from you, with their only win being against Eastern Washington so far this season and the first game.
So, they lost to 3 of our teams from the WCC already: San Diego, Santa Clara, San Francisco. They absolutely, at worst, have to finish November in these last 3 games 2-1. They need to beat Pepperdine, and then they need to get a split of these games against George Mason and Washington, because outside of these 2 games, they really don't have a lot of opportunities to get any kind of good wins in December. You got Loyola Marymount and you got Grand Canyon, but Grand Canyon, well, they're good, and I think they have the best atmosphere for a home game. I guess I'll say outside the Power 5, but even including a lot of the Power 5 teams, it's almost impossible to go in and play Grand Canyon at home. So I think outside of those 2 games, there isn't much of a challenge for them in the non-conference. And if they can't prove that they can beat halfway decent to good teams, which is what they're playing in their next 2 games, then I'm about ready to completely rule them out of the Mountain West. Because if you can't beat even halfway decent teams outside your conference, there's more than decent teams in your conference that would absolutely cook you all January, February, March.
So the least amount of points, it's their defense. It's 100% what's cost them this so far. And they don't really have a lockdown guy. The least amount of points they've allowed so far is 73. They allowed 76 in their win to Eastern Washington. South Dakota State put up 102. I know they're scoring at will right now, but they're allowing teams to shoot 39.8% from 3 and 56.5% from 2. Sure, 4 teams can just get hot against you, I guess, or it's a little bit of a bigger picture where teams are hitting double-digit threes against them at will right now. George Mason is a little bit slumping in their own right after the best start to the season, I think, in their history. They've dropped 2 in a row. So you got 2 hungry teams in a prove-it game tonight at the Pentagon. It's going to be a good one to tune into. I don't think Nevada can turn it around right now just because their record's going to turn it around, because you said they kind of have a cakewalk coming up, especially because they don't travel. Their toughest road test coming up is going to be probably their only one, which is at North Texas. So to your point, they have no resume builder wins here. They basically need to get through the rest of the schedule scot-free if they want to have a chance sniffing it. So I don't think that they have a chance to turn it around unless they win the Mountain West. That's the only way that they would be going dancing this year.
Yep. And then, I mean, honestly, I think we can both agree that Nevada's getting close to being a lost cause this year. But my other two teams are both still ranked in the top 25, but with multiple losses already this year. And those teams are I'm starting to get just a little worried about Michigan. I know their losses are Seton Hall and Arizona. But I mean, with the pieces that Michigan has in place in Dickinson and Diabate and Caleb Houston, what's beating them was it felt like Arizona's length was kind of beating them, just forcing turnovers. And then Seton Hall, even if they might not be the tallest team, they have guys with big wingspans that can jump into passing lanes. Even with all the hype, I don't think Michigan can go far in the tournament if they're still so, I'm going to call it lazy, not necessarily as a whole offense, but kind of lazy with their passes where they're just letting themselves get jumped by teams that can like jump passing lanes and get out into fast break opportunities. Like if that's not something they can fix, then that has the potential to be a long-term problem for them.
It definitely does. The Arizona game is the one where I'm still not 100% sure how Michigan just was. I don't want to say not in it, but Arizona is just a Pac-12 team that, man, when they hit their highs, they hit their highs. But they went to Wichita State in overtime the night before, 2 nights before, which wasn't a very convincing result. With the Michigan offense against the Seton Hall team in the final 5 minutes, they were playing more of that not to lose style by running time off the clock and then just not generating that strong of chances like they were. And then Dickinson still had 18 points, but he wasn't that go-to threat, which it usually is. And then in their most recent loss at Arizona, you said the length was a factor. He had 11 points, and that was easily his worst of the season so far. But I think it has to – which guard? I think that's where it comes down to more. I think you can't put it to Dickinson at this point. Eli Brooks is showing up good stats-wise, but is he making the best decision in crunch times? I mean, that's where it's kind of when I come down to it. I don't really know who to point it to just because it was this team a little bit oversold at the beginning of the year. I don't think so. A little bit of growing pain still. I can't really put a finger to it yet what's off about it just because their losses haven't been that terrible losses yet.
Yeah, and they haven't been that bad. Like they haven't got beat by like some mid-major that we know isn't going to be that good. But I mean, like you're still playing two teams that were unranked coming into your games. You got to find a way to pull those out if you're a top 4 team or a team that people think should have like a 1 or a 2 seed at the end of the year. But I mean, even though they've had like a couple, I'm not going to call them good losses, but I can't really call them bad losses yet either. They haven't looked as bad as Illinois, which has been real sad for me. I know they didn't have Coburn for their loss against Marquette, but the one that really gets me is their game against Cincinnati. They got the doors blown off pretty much. And the thing is, I don't necessarily think the problem would be having Coburn in or out of the lineup. My biggest problem has been the lack of shooting. So the lack of shooting from the guards has been a problem for me. Like Trent Frazier was 0 for 9 yesterday and 0 of 5 from 3. You can never have that happen in a game. And Curbelo was still only 4 of 12 and 1 of 4 from 3. But if Curbelo doesn't cut down on his turnovers, I know he had 7 in a game earlier this year, and he just had 5 against Cincinnati. If he can't cut down those turnovers, Illinois doesn't really have a chance to be an above average team this year.
Wow. Doesn't have the ability to be an above average team. I think Michigan can easily get out of their funk that they're in. I think it's just going to take time for them to start gelling a little bit more in offense. Their 2 losses were just because the teams could shut them down defensively for long stretch. With Illinois here, everyone was going to the part and harping to the few games where Iowa was out at the end of the year last year, saying like, "Oh, we're bringing everyone back." Corbello showed that he could be the guy. And so far this season, teams have been able to game plan against him a little bit stronger. Last night was the most typical fade the team with their star player coming back with Kofi returning last night. Wes Miller was his first statement win at Cincinnati, where wasn't the best team for them to go into. Cincinnati last season, Illinois probably romps them given where they're currently at in the same season with the same teams that this old coach was there. But with Wes Miller, got to give him credit. He won them that game, and it just looked like Cincinnati threw in the towel. The game against Marquette, they're missing their most dominated factor in the middle there, who I think probably would have pulled it out there. Their other 2 games that looked convincing, but they weren't against anyone strong. So that's where coming up against Kansas State today. That's the game where if this is going to be the one to say if I have concerns or not. After you just got shellacked, sure it was on the neutral site. If they lay another egg or another dud tonight, then I would start hovering over the Big Ten is that good that we could potentially fall to the 5th or 6th seed in there, which makes our path to the tournament a little bit more difficult. But the Big Ten will get 9 teams in the tournament every single year. But that's where I think it's still a little too early. But if they truly struggle with Kansas State tonight, then I'm going to start to have to look deeper into, all right, where's the biggest issue that's in this team? Because you can't lose to Kansas State by any means.
Yeah, I honestly think if the loss last night doesn't light enough of a fire in them to not only win this game, but to win this game and cover the 10.5 that I'm seeing, there's something a little bit deeper going on, because it's not like they get all that much easier. I mean, there's not a ton of hard games in there, but you still have to play Arizona. You got a game against Iowa coming up. No disrespect, Goose, but Rutgers hasn't been that good. I think even if Illinois
I didn't want to say that one since I know he's watching us, because I was going to flip to a different team, but that would be the one I would be the most worried about.
Yeah, their offense, Rutgers' offense has just been almost non-existent all year. And I hate gassing up any other Big East teams, but Rutgers, you cannot, under any circumstances, lose to DePaul.
It's not even that loss, man. It was the loss to Lafayette.
Well, yeah, that too. And then only putting up 48 points against Merrimack. This has not been great for them.
Yeah. That's who I wanted to use and go to with mine, but I didn't want to go off too long on it. There's a team in the battle for Atlantis that I'm decently low on. Other than that, it's still a little too early in the season to really write off some teams that we think are screwed, but I think 2 of the 3 will come through.
Yeah, which team are we thinking in the battle for Atlantis?
VCU.
Ah, damn. I thought you were going to say Syracuse. I really wanted it to be Syracuse. Fuck
no, because I know we'll go on that one. I think VCU can still work through it, but I knew that their offense was going to start extremely slow due to their injuries and what they lost. Their defense is still top-notch, but 2 losses already on the season going into a tough tournament where they could potentially lose a whole 3 of their games there. Yeah.
Yeah, I really wanted them to be better, but it doesn't look like this is it for VCU this year.
All right, so now we're going to get into some games, maybe get into the gambling portion of this. So we know with Gonzaga and UCLA tonight, we got to get through this one. You already heard some of my thoughts on Daily Bread earlier today. I'll give a little bit more recap to try to give a different angle on it. But Steven, since no one's heard your official thoughts on 1 versus 2. If you don't stay up tonight, you're wild. I got a Red Bull specifically for it, so I can pop it like right at 9:30. What are you liking in the game?
Yeah. I mean, contrary to what I've heard, a couple people, I honestly don't know his name. I've just seen him doing like the college basketball show on ESPN, who was hating on Drew
That's
Timme.
your first issue is watching ESPN, but go on.
Well, yeah, that is an issue, but it was just because it was in between basketball games that I was watching. But this guy was just kind of like shitting on Drew Timme for like being emotional and just kind of like doing his stuff that he does after he fucking scores. Like when he just points out that a guy's fucking little because he's scoring over him. This guy was shitting on him for that. That's just that old college basketball fan that we don't want here, because we need that type of emotion in college basketball. That shit is fun, first of all. But sadly, even after I like what Drew Timme's doing and what Gonzaga has, give me the Bruins here. I'm still on Johnny Juzang. I love that guy. I think as long as Jaquez doesn't fuck it up for them, I mean, UCLA's got the team to make a deep run. Like, they shot like absolute shit against Villanova, and guess what? They still won in overtime. If they shoot just even moderately well today, they have the talent and the guys to beat anyone, including this Gonzaga team. I mean, I definitely like them plus the 7. Maybe if I'm feeling frisky and have enough beers beforehand, sprinkle the money line, but definitely plus 7.
Damn, you're a wild man. You definitely think there's the revenge angle here. You think Miles Johnson, the Rutgers transfer, like who's going to be able to control Timme on the inside here?
Oh, I think it can be Johnson. I think it could also be Chris Smith or whatever his name is, the guy coming back from injury.
Yeah, that's my biggest issue is on the inside. If Timmy's having his way, then they can just build out a comfortable enough lead and control the game enough. The other part is, sure, UCLA's played some opponents so far, but teams are shooting 38% against them on deep. Not something you really want to see against the Gonzaga side. Sure, they're only shooting 35%, but they usually tend to bury you with those threes when they need to. UCLA also isn't getting to the line well so far this season. One way to get Gonzaga into the weaker part of their roster is their depth. They're going to have to be able to draw some fouls today. Tiger Campbell's going to have to be clinical with it because I think he's going to be able to win his matchup. I know Nemhard can go decent when they sub him in to go against it, but I think Campbell's going to be your biggest piece. Vaquez Jr., if he goes off tonight, Mark Few should just retire. No, I'm just kidding. He should not. But could be the check come out game. This is the first one where everyone's going to be like the too lanky, the too skinny of a guy doesn't have the body. They're definitely going to see him show out tonight. I think this is a game where ESPN's just going to start going way too hard over this guy going forward. It's going to suck. But I think it's hard to lay 7 here. So that's where the -7, I don't know. Gonzaga in the regular season is tough. So that's where there's no way I'm actually going with a +7 on UCLA here. I need to watch this game from a non-biased way just from what my bet is. But I think the total would have to be the way you go here. Because when I was talking earlier, can UCLA win in a fast-paced up-and-down game with Gonzaga here? Because UCLA likes to play with the slower pace in the half-court offense a little bit more than Gonzaga does. But I don't think UCLA wants to run with them. Even though they have the talent, I don't think they should.
I think Tiger Campbell can have an impact in stopping Timme from going off, because I think he's a hard enough defender that if he just pressures the ball and doesn't give them a good look to even get the ball down low to Timme or get it to him in the first place, then that just makes Miles Johnson and everybody else's job that much easier. I don't know. I think UCLA kind of has the right makeup because Johnson's a good defender. Campbell's a good defender, but then at the same time, Juzang is a really good offensive piece. And I mean, you think this is going to be Chet Holmgren's coming out game? I think it could be the same thing, but on the other side for UCLA's freshman. I think Peyton Watson could have a really good game because Gonzaga knows everybody else that's on UCLA's roster. They haven't had to play against Watson yet. I think this could be his game where he kind of starts to shine a little bit more.
All right. Going with the different freshmen. They got the two freshman predictions going at each other tonight. Feel a little bit more safe and comfortable with mine, just knowing that Chet gets a little bit more consistent minutes than Watson does. A little bit more tough to crack that, but regardless, success starts at 10 for us East Coast guys, but it's worth staying up for and being tired. We got 10-0 Houston to start the second half, Steven. So
only down 10 or only down 10 plus the 7.5. I'm only down 17.5. Not bad.
All right. So if you guys are still tapping in with us, Battle for Atlantis. This is the next 3 days. So it starts tomorrow, bracket style, 8 teams. Each team gets 3 games. We're just going to talk about the winning side of it when we get into our little November bracket talk here. So we're just going to run through the matchups real quick and then get basically to who we think is going to come out on each side and who's going to be playing on the ship. I believe that's on Thanksgiving Day.
Oh, Black Friday, I think.
That's on Black Friday? Word.
Yeah, because if it starts tomorrow, there's 8 teams. It should be Black Friday if they're doing 3 days straight. But I'm going to sound like a homer here. I mean, I don't really, outside of a championship matchup against Baylor, I don't see a team that UConn doesn't have an advantage over. Like, Auburn's pretty good, but I don't think Patrick Baldwin – is it Patrick Baldwin Jr.? No, that's the guy for Milwaukee. Who's the fucking guy? Oh, Jabari Smith Jr. Always get those two confused. But, so, I mean, Auburn's got KD Johnson, Jabari Smith Jr. I don't think that's enough to deal with UConn's pressure, and I don't think that's enough depth on the inside, especially with him being a freshman. That usually leads to foul trouble. UConn runs about 4 deep in the front court. There's been enough shooting so far this year. Cook has looked good again as a shooter. Polly's still a shooter. Even Jalen Gaffney he's starting to have his breakout year this year. But so I think UConn can get past Auburn, and then it's the same thing in either matchup against Michigan State or Loyola. So with Michigan State, I don't think Michigan State has the size either, and they're kind of inexperienced. They're relying on Max Christie, another freshman, a guy who will be prone to turnovers against that press. So I think UConn makes it out of that side to play Baylor. And then on the other side, it's Baylor and not really much else competition. Like, you got VCU and Syracuse. VCU would never be able to score with Baylor this year. Syracuse's zone doesn't look like what we expect Syracuse's zone to look like, the way they got fucking torched by Colgate. So I'm seeing like a UConn Baylor final. And because I'm not going to be that kind of guy where I just only pick my team, I do think Baylor wins the battle for Atlantis in the end.
You think your team cakewalks the one side, but ends up losing?
Not necessarily cakewalks. Like, I'm not saying they're going to win each game by 10 to 15 points, but I think the depth and the defensive pressure and the experience is enough to beat both Auburn and either matchup of Michigan State or Loyola.
So the one thing that I do know for certain out of all of this is tomorrow's Syracuse versus VCU game. That's probably going under very, very hard. I don't think that game breaks 110 points in it. So that's the most confident thing I can tell you about this battle for Atlantis tournament. Neither of these teams got the offense going. So that's why it's kind of a shame where those two drew each other and you didn't separate Auburn and UConn from playing each other, because that would basically ideally break out the bracket and kind of give you the most competitive matchups on the second possible day. But the UConn-Auburn treat, I'm definitely not going to be disappointed by it. I'm just happy that you guys are playing someone who isn't a bottom 50 team in the nation. All the teams they played so far are 300 plus. So you kind of got your tune-up games in there. You got your full rotation down where UConn's been throwing 9 or 10 guys out there because it really doesn't matter who they play. They would have beaten those teams out there. Going against Auburn, if they can withstand that first 10 minutes, I think UConn can get out of it because you guys are going to have to dictate that pace because it's kind of the same thing. You have a huge contradicting style compared to Gonzaga versus UCLA. Both of those teams are still top 100 in pace or just on the different spectrums. You guys are ranking around 250th in pace when Auburn's top 50 again. So that's where will UConn attempt to run with Auburn might determine that game.
Yeah. I don't know. I think they've done a really good job of just on ball defending enough to keep teams away from being able to run. Like all the defenders are more than capable enough that guys just aren't going to blow by them to run that top 50 pace. Like if Auburn really wants to play that fast, they're going to be taking bad contested shots, which will just be bad for them. So they either have to slow down and play our pace, which I'm happy with, or they have to take contested shots. And I mean, if they're hitting those contested shots, good for them. They deserve to win. But I don't think it happens consistently enough for them to be able to win tomorrow.
Yeah, so like you have, I got Baylor coming through the other side. That's kind of just a cakewalk where they got probably, honestly, the 3 weakest teams out of all of them in there because I got to give Loyola Chicago a little bit of respect over Syracuse and where VCU currently stand. I think Loyola Chicago can definitely make it interesting for Michigan State. If Porter was there, I would probably be putting my money on Loyola to fight in St. Jean's to pull this one off. Still might. So that's kind of the game where I'm not sold on, which hurts with my bracket prediction here. So we'll go with it live. I don't think the winner of Auburn UConn gets out of it. So I'm going to go with Loyola Chicago is going to be playing Baylor in the finals for the battle for Atlantis. But we'll share the same winner. I think Baylor's cutting down the Nets.
All right, I don't hate that, but I mean, because we all know Loyola's like that in tournaments. Like they just got some type of shit going on there that when they're in any kind of tournament, they win games. But I got
that line tomorrow is the under in Syracuse VCU when that gets dropped. I'm going to be looking to that. You can follow me on Twitter if I make it official. But if I get 3.5 on Loyola Chicago or anything more with the plus points, I'm definitely taking that because I'm not going to be laying points with Michigan State in this game. No
way. And you know what? I can tell those girls that I saw at the Champions Classic that Michigan State still stinks. All right, they are not that team this year.
They can be come March. Izzo always gets it figured out by March. And their only losses to Kansas, they've won the rest of their 3 games rather convincingly. So that's where I'm definitely going on the ledge here, thinking that Loyola Chicago can pull off the outright win. But granted, the competition in those other games wasn't too great because this Butler team's looking pretty that was probably the one team that we should have brought up with is can they avoid a slow start? And no. All right, so now that we got basically wrapped up, went through all of our segments, Steven, is there any I know you tweeted out a card today. Is there any picks you want to share before you wrap it up for tonight?
I have just one more game that hasn't started yet, and I might be falling into a trap here because they might have some injuries that aren't listed. Because when I checked the injury report, I didn't see anything. But I love Lipscomb -2 against Tennessee Tech today. I think Lipscomb's still one of the really good teams in the A-Sun. I don't think Tennessee Tech is all that good. So if both teams are at full strength, I really don't see how Lipscomb loses right here. All my other plays outside of Texas A&M that already won, not looking great. I mean, Toledo's all right. I got them -2.5. They're up 11. And I mean, Rice is only down 5 to Oakland, so maybe that's got a chance. But fucking Houston, man, it's really all I can say. Like, Wisconsin doesn't have the guys this year. You're the number 12 team in the country. Even if you don't cover, this is still a game you should have won.
Yeah, that's going to be a tough loss for Houston looking back at the end of the season where it could have been a nice resume defining win because the American, it looks a little bit stronger this year. Nothing too much. But the one thing I've just noticed about the Lipscomb game you give out, all their totals have open or their spreads have opened much, much lower than Ken Palm and all your advanced analytics people have been thinking. It's just kind of like a little war between Vegas and the stats right now. And granted, come the end of the day, I'm not too sure exactly what they are ATS, but they're 4-1. Their loss against Charleston isn't that terrible, but they've been in competing most games. No one else really wants to hear about Lipscomb anymore. Follow Steven on Twitter.
Why is that? Is that just because you don't want me to say that they housed one of your A10 teams? Absolutely housed Dayton by 20 in their last game.
Dayton's not going to be good. St. Joe's might have a chance to beat them this year, so that's where Dayton's currently at.
Damn, from OB Toppin to fall down to they might lose to St. Joe's in 2 years. Tough.
Yep, real tough. But make sure you follow Steven under his head. Definitely tweet some UConn shit at him tomorrow, especially if you're an Auburn fan. It'll be a very good time for you if Auburn wins outright. You guys already know me, so do whatever you want to do. We appreciate all you guys tapping in with us. Next Tuesday, we'll be live right around the same time. If you guys want to hop in and join for a part of it, talk about your squad, get in Steven's and I's DMs. We're open to get people on the show. Any topics, segments, hit us up with anything you want us to talk about. But we appreciate you guys viewing with us. We'll catch you on the flip side.